At the height of the Roman Empire, one man held absolute authority over the known world. He could order executions without trial, seize entire nations, and command unimaginable wealth. Yet, instead of leaning into that supremacy, he spent his nights meticulously training his own mind to ignore and strip value from that exact power. Marcus Aurelius ruled during a period of relentless instability. His reign was defined by the Antonine Plague, which decimated the population, unending wars along the Germanic borders, and a deep political betrayal by his most trusted general. To survive this chaos without losing his grip on reality, he needed a cognitive defense mechanism. He documented this defense mechanism in a series of private journals we now call the Meditations. But treating this text as a diary or a book meant for the public misses its function. It is an exercise in ascesis, the Greek term for rigorous, active cognitive training. He was building a psychological firewall to prevent the mental decay that normally accompanies absolute rule. To construct this firewall, Marcus engineered a distinct two-part cognitive framework. We can think of it as a closed-loop mechanical system. It blocks out the timeline of cosmic decay and the physical chaos of the empire, allowing the user to maintain an entirely separate, sovereign internal logic. Understanding the precise mechanics of this epistemological system is crucial. Today, Stoicism is often reduced to superficial life hacks for productivity or stress management, but reading the actual text reveals a rigorous, systemic architecture for processing reality. Marcus opens his manual by recording a catalog of observed behaviors from his family and tutors. This text from Book 1 shows the repetitive, list-like nature of these initial entries, logging precise behavioral outputs like his grandfather's good manners and his mother's simplicity. In this framework, virtue is a replicable mechanism. He treats the character of others as raw data, feeding these observations into his moral compass. Much like a machine learning model, Marcus uses the behavior of his mentors as a training dataset to calibrate his ethical responses. We see this calibration in his notes on his teacher Apollonius. Marcus isolates a specific psychological trait, writing that Apollonius provided a living example of how a man can be simultaneously most yielding and most inflexible, depending on the circumstance. He extracts a similarly complex data point from his mentor Sextus. Looking closely at Section 9, we see Marcus isolating the ability to suppress even the least appearance of anger, while simultaneously managing to possess the tenderest and most affectionate heart. There is a critical assumption built into this method. Marcus relies entirely on his external perception of these men, assuming that their outward actions perfectly mirror their internal reality. This treats behavioral control as proof of internal peace. It leaves no room for a mentor experiencing severe internal distress beneath an unbothered exterior. Even with that blind spot, this first phase, inductive observation, serves a vital function. It proves to the user that virtue is physically possible in the real world, relying on continuous observation of active role models rather than abstract thought. Once defined by observation, the system needs a place to execute. This is the central processor of the Stoic mind, the ruling faculty. Physical impacts cannot force this core to move. It only rotates when driven by its own internal mechanisms. The mechanics work through an epistemological filter. External sensory data hits the body and is converted into impressions, but the ruling faculty possesses absolute veto power over those impressions, deciding whether to accept them as good, bad, or indifferent. This design asserts that human reason is an entirely self-sufficient system. It generates its own motion, requiring absolutely no input from the outside world. Marcus defines this insulation directly. This excerpt from Section 8 outlines the exact specifications. The ruling part of you is that which rouses and steers itself, making itself what it wishes to be, and making all that happens take such appearance as it will. This requires an extreme degree of philosophical dualism. It draws an impenetrable boundary between the physical body, which is subject to the world, and the rational mind, which is entirely sovereign. By modern scientific standards, this premise is flawed. It ignores the physiological reality that our rational faculties are inextricably tied to neurochemistry, physical trauma, and sheer exhaustion. The mind and body cannot be neatly divorced. Yet, operating under this absolute dualism gives Marcus his ultimate defense. Within this framework, external events, whether a battlefield defeat or a deadly plague, possess zero inherent moral weight. They can only harm the emperor if his internal rational algorithm actively chooses to grant them that power. To reinforce this internal isolation, Marcus relies on a secondary mechanism, zooming out from the microscopic operations of the mind to the macro level of Stoic osmology. He applies a concept we can call cosmic reductionism, the premise that all physical matter is momentary. By framing human existence against deep time, Marcus proves that dedicating a life to material accumulation or historical fame is a mathematical error. He frequently tests this math by running comparisons between ultimate conquerors of the ancient world and its philosophers. He points specifically to men who shaped history through force. Conquerors like Alexander schemed for immense power, but were ultimately enslaved by their physical desires. He contrasts conquerors with thinkers who operated differently. Philosophers like Socrates achieved true power by mastering the only territory they actually controlled, their own minds. There is a distinct risk to applying this perspective. If all things are destined to vanish, this worldview easily collapses into apathy or sheer fatalism. Marcus avoids that collapse by demanding a leap of faith into what the Stoics called social duty. He reminds himself that despite the vastness of the cosmos, all rational creatures are united to serve the common good, functioning like limbs on a single biological body. By continuously contrasting the permanence of universal reason against the rapid decay of material existence, Marcus creates a psychological solvent. It actively neutralizes ambition, grief, and fear before they breach his mind. When we assemble these components, we see the continuous flow of information through a fully constructed cognitive engine. External mentors serve as the input. The cosmic perspective acts as a filter. The ruling faculty processes the data, and virtuous action is the final output. The inductive observation of reality calibrates his control variables, while the cosmic scale erases the noise of his imperial environment, feeding clean logic into his central processor. The Meditations is the operational manual for this exact engine. It was written by a man who recognized his absolute power was a toxic environment and was desperate to retain his humanity while surviving it. To keep this system running, he issues himself direct, active commands. In Section 7, the text reads like code meant to override instinct. Wipe out impression, stay impulse, quench desire, and keep the governing part master of itself. Reading these commands in a quiet room is comfortable. Executing them while commanding legions, managing a plague, and facing betrayal is a staggering cognitive burden. True philosophical inquiry, as modeled by the Philosopher King, is the brutal, daily process of aligning one's internal logic with the immovable laws of nature.